Back in the day, choosing an ultrawide panel was a very simple affair. You either went for the LG 34UM95 or the Dell U3415W, both of which came with a 3440 by 1440 resolution as well as a fairly hefty price tag. Nowadays, however, with the ultrawide market exploding, with every man and his dog producing an ultrawide variant of some sort, it can get a little bit tricky. Today we're going to take a look at the Acer Predator X34 and Z35, two superficially very similar monitors that, depending on what you need, will suit two very different purposes and budgets. So before we get into the meat and potatoes of this video, first let's go over why you'd even consider an ultrawide monitor in the first place. The primary appeal behind an ultrawide is, well, the fact that it's ultra-wide. The extra horizontal resolution that you get over a standard 16:9 panel, precisely 880 pixels if you're moving from your standard 27-inch 1440p panel, means that you just have a lot more room to do stuff. Being able to see more of your timeline in Adobe Premiere, having 3 or even 4 documents open at once, or just general multitasking, the benefits of the extra pixels are obvious. It can really help speed up your workflow and improve your productivity. But ultrawides aren't all about business. The 21:9 resolution means that movies are an absolute dream to watch, as most films are shot within the more cinematic widescreen format. This means that you'll be able to enjoy your media content with no black bars and have an extremely pleasing experience. Just full disclosure though, that most TV programs are 16:9, as well as YouTube content, so black bars are present for those mediums. Apart from being fantastic for movies, this unique format also opens up a great opportunity for gamers. Given that you have extra horizontal pixels means that you'll also have a greater field of view, allowing you to see more of your game as you're playing. I can honestly say that it's quite a phenomenal experience. Playing Tomb Raider on the Predator X34 was one of the few times I've actually had to put the controller down and just stare at the game because of how pretty it was. Whether or not this gives you a competitive edge of your teammates is debatable, but the train of thought is indeed present within the reasonably long list of pros for ultrawide. So with all that said and done, let's take a quick look at a couple of options. Just so you know, this is going to be an overview as opposed to a full review, as this is more of a which monitor suits you type of video. If you were interested in a full review of the monitors, there will be a straw poll down below to cast your vote. Highest one gets a review over the next few weeks. First off, we have the Acer Predator X34, a 34-inch 3440 by 1440 resolution IPS display from Acer. Being the headlining act of Acer's gaming range, it is also G-Sync compatible and overclockable to 100Hz. As far as gaming monitors go, you really can't get better than this. As for how the monitor looks, well, I'll just mention that a few weeks ago I reviewed the 27-inch variant of this panel, the XP27 1HU, and I was not impressed with the over-the-top gamer-orientated look. With the X34, however, even with the Predator logo imprinted on the bottom, I think Acer have done an absolutely incredible job and created a stunning looking product. Starting off with the base, Acer has gone with a sleek gunmetal stand with splayed feet that supports the monitor very well. Considering this is a 34-inch panel and can be susceptible to wobble when typing, this is actually quite an important feature. Even when typing, the monitor stayed well in place. The rest of the stand flows into an industrial back with an included hole for routing cables. I found this very useful for keeping my mice and keyboard cables well hidden and out of sight. One other feature of the stand is also a carrying hook at the top. Now, for anyone that's not carried one of these before, I'll just let you know that they are incredibly cumbersome and awkward to transport. Even just putting it on your desk is a bit of a challenge. But having the handhold at the top makes this 1,000 times easier, and I wish that this will be included on every ultrawide panel I see in the future. One negative I do have about the stand is that you'll need a fairly deep desk for this to sit properly. The stand pushes a panel about 30 centimeters back from your desk, so if your desk is fairly shallow, you may want to consider a VESA mount. Moving on to the panel itself, the bezels are very thin and it's pretty damn gorgeous. Worth noting, however, is that you do have a centimeter worth of black border from the displayed area and the edge of the side and top bezels. As for the bottom bezel, well, I've got to say Acer have done a very good job. While it is quite thick, it doesn't look out of place on a 34-inch panel, and the logo doesn't stand out as much as I thought it would, even though I would prefer something a little less obtrusive. The panel itself is also beyond excellent. Out of the box, the X34 offers superb color reproduction that will satisfy the large majority of users and professionals. Color shift isn't a huge deal with the panel, even though it is slightly curved. The shot you see right now is from the right hand side. The curve as well is very subtle, and I'll just point out it's not aimed as a gimmick to increase immersiveness, but rather ensure that every point of the monitor is the same distance away from your eye. If you are doing CAD or design work that relies on having perfectly straight lines though, you may want to opt for a flat panel option, as the curve can distort straight lines. Now, where would any review be without mentioning the backlight bleed? When I tested out the X34, I'm really sorry to say, but I was absolutely disgusted and really just quite disappointed, considering that this is a $2,000 panel, that I wouldn't have anything bad to say about it. Gotcha. When testing out the panel at night with a full back screen on the sample I have, the backlight bleed is virtually non-existent. You can see some slight bleed in the corners, but it's negligible in my opinion. So gaming, productivity, movies, what was it like? To keep it short, excellent all round. So that's the X34. Over the week I've had to test it, I can safely say this is the best gaming panel I have ever used. But I also tried another panel this week, and that was the Z35. The Z35 is the bigger brother in terms of physical size, but little brother in terms of its resolution. Sporting a 2560 by 1080 resolution, this monitor is an absolute monstrosity and takes up a huge portion of your desk, coming in at 35 inches. The stand stays true with the rest of the Predator lineup, with the red chromium making another appearance. Personally, I'm not a fan, but some may like it. The stand is again extremely solid, and I didn't notice much wobble at all when typing, despite the panel being a whopping 35 inches. One other thing I liked about the stand is that you can seat this slightly further back on your desk than the X34. For those of you with a shallower desk, this may be something you want to consider. One quirky thing I found about this monitor is how much attention they've paid to the back. The rear of the Z35 is covered in a beautiful gunmetal plastic that looks incredibly nice, and I find it's an absolute shame you won't get to see it most of the time. I also found it a bit odd, considering how great the back looks, that the front is a little bit lackluster. The bezels are quite thick, coming in at 1 cm of pure plastic, which means it does not look as refined as the X34. The panel on the Z35 is unfortunately nothing to write home about. It's a VA panel, so yes, it is better than your regular TN panel, and it is capable of 100% of the sRGB scale, but I found that its color reproduction wasn't anywhere near as good as the X34's. But that's not to say the Z35 is especially bad, because it's not. For a VA panel, it's actually pretty decent, and I do feel that comparing this panel to the X34 is a bit unfair, but that's only because the X34 is a truly amazing panel, and it would be hard for any monitor to come really close to what the flagship has to offer. Anyway, back to the Z35. The panel also features your usual G-Sync compatibility, as well as the ability to overclock to the 200Hz, which is quite an achievement. This means that for those truly competitive FPS gamers out there, there is indeed an ultrawide panel out there for you. Gaming on the Z35, especially on FPS games, was a pretty joyous experience. Everything felt incredibly tight and snappy, and given the size of the panel, I would say that the experience was more immersive than I was used to. One other cool thing I'll mention about the panels is that both have some LEDs integrated on the bottom of the monitor, providing for some pretty slick downlighting. So, which one is for you? Well, there are a number of factors to consider, and it entirely depends on your use case and how much money you're willing to invest. If your use case is gaming and productivity, then I would highly recommend going for the X34. The 3440 by 1440 resolution is an absolute dream to work with, whether you're editing video, Word documents, or just plain multitasking. Gaming as well on the X34 is an unbeaten experience in my book, and you simply can't go wrong with this monitor. So, why not the Z35 for productivity? Well, that simply comes down to pixels per inch. The 2560 by 1080 resolution of the Z35 means that you have roughly 2,800,000 pixels to play with, whereas the X34 has 5 million. That's pretty much twice the pixels, which means that you have almost twice the work area, especially if you start thinking about virtual desktops. If you think you can make it work, then that's your call, but if I was to do anything productivity related, I would go with the X34 hands down. For me, it's a perfect combination of productivity and gaming, with the G-Sync compatible panel and 100Hz refresh rate, which is just enough for my own gaming needs. So why then would you choose the Z35 over the X34? Well, that again comes down to pixels. The 2.8 million pixels of the Z35 means that you're able to get away with running a cheaper graphics card and increase your frame rates at the same time. Let's look at some benchmarks while I explain. I ran benchmarks for Metro Last Night, Rainbow Six Siege, as well as XCOM 2 and Rise of the Tomb Raider, all recent titles. And as you can see, the 970 we tested with struggles to hit that 60 FPS with the 3440 by 1440 resolution, especially in games like XCOM 2 and Rise of the Tomb Raider. While it was still quite smooth with G-Sync, it does mean that you're not getting the most out of the X34's 100Hz refresh rate, and you do get the occasional stutter. When you switch to the 2560x1080 on the other hand, the frames increase dramatically and your gameplay becomes silky smooth, with the 970 managing to pull over 100 frames in Metro and Rainbow Six Siege, close to 100 with XCOM and over 60 frames with Rise of the Tomb Raider, which is quite impressive. So what does that mean for you then? Well, if you're a budget-conscious ultrawide gamer and you really are only concerned about gaming, then the Z35 is your best bet. The VA panel is quite good, and the ability to run a cheaper graphics card like the 970 or equivalent means that the total cost of your rig goes down significantly, a total cost of $2,300. If you're going to be doing any kind of productivity work though with some gaming thrown in, I would definitely recommend opting for the X34, as the increased resolution makes for a much better platform for your workflow. Not only this, but your games will look immeasurably sharper as you get a much better pixels per inch ratio as opposed to the Z35. With the Z35 being both larger and having a lower resolution, the difference in quality is indeed noticeable. The jump to the X34 though does come at a cost compared to the Z35 setup. The X34 and a 980 Ti will run you at a minimum $3,200. What we'd like to know though are your thoughts. Would you choose the extra pixels and productivity potential of the X34, or would you rather the pure gaming performance and slightly more budget-friendly option of the Z35? Sound off in the comments down below. As for now though, this is Matt from Computer Lounge, signing out.